Daniel LaPlante was born in 1970 in Townsend, Massachusetts, and lived with his mother and stepfather. Daniel's life wasn't easy due to the dysfunctional household that he was living in. He dealt with constant abuse on a daily basis from the adults in his life. The abuse was not only physical, but psychological as well, with his father being responsible for the majority of it. The family's home was overrun with loads of junk and stray animals to the point where the neighbors basically avoided them. He struggled in school with untreated dyslexia and hyperactive disorder and was very much a loner who couldn't make friends. Daniel had an unpleasant appearance and suffered from poor hygiene. He was also known to display strange and creepy behaviors, causing his neighbors and classmates to fear him. Due to all of this, he was eventually sent to a psychiatrist for treatment. However, the visits to the psychiatrist would take a dark turn when the psychiatrist began physically abusing Daniel as well. At this point in Daniel's life, most of the adults who were supposed to help and protect him had basically taken advantage of him. So by the age of 15, he was burglarizing people's homes, and sometimes he would break in, not steal anything, but just for the sole purpose of playing mind games with the owners. When Daniel was 16, he obtained the phone number of a local 15-year-old girl named Tina Bowen. Tina and her 9-year-old sister Karen lived with their father Frank and had recently lost their mother to cancer. Tina and Daniel began speaking with each other over the phone for a period of time and basically formed a friendship. Frank would eventually meet Daniel when he drove him and Tina to the movies for a date. However, the relationship between Tina and Daniel would be short-lived after friends of Tina told her about Daniel's shady past. After the short-lived relationship ended, Tina and Karen began hearing strange noises in their house. They would also find that items around the house were being mysteriously moved, milk in a glass had mysteriously vanished, and TV channels were randomly changed. All this occurred when the daughters would leave the room and return. However, Frank wasn't buying it and didn't initially believe his daughters. That is, until December 8, 1986, when the Bowen family returned home to find the toilet had been used and items were once again out of place. Frank immediately began searching the house for an intruder and would find Daniel hiding in a closet. Daniel was holding a hatchet and ordered the family into the bedroom where they barricaded themselves in. Thankfully, they were able to help Tina out of a window where she escaped and ran to the neighbor's home to call the police. However, when the police arrived, Daniel was gone, but they would find that he had stolen money and jewels and stuck butcher knives in the walls. It was also said that he had smeared ketchup and mayonnaise all over the walls as well. The Bowen family temporarily left the home, but a couple of days later, Frank went back to retrieve a few items. That's when he saw Daniel peering through the front window. When police arrived and entered the home, they found messages written on family photos. One said, "I'm still here, come find me." And the other said, "I'm going to kill you all with a knife through it." After calling for backup, the police found Daniel hiding under a pile of clothes in the house. In these sketches, you can see Daniel's secret hiding place in the Bowen home. You may have heard this story before and heard it told with the names Brian, Annie, and Jessica Andrews, but from my research, it appears that those names were all made up and the true story was changed to fit a more paranormal theme. That story speaks of Angie and Jessica contacting their mother via a Ouija board and then believing their house was haunted due to the things Daniel was doing. It also speaks about Daniel attacking the father, Brian, with a hatchet while wearing his late wife's wedding dress. However, most of this is simply not true. I did find a newspaper article that says when Frank Bowen found Daniel, he was actually wearing a ninja mask and was dressed, as the article said, an Indian. 16-year-old Daniel was arrested and charged with several offenses and placed in a juvenile facility. Soon after, the courts decided to try him as an adult and set his bail at $10,000 cash. His mother then mortgaged their home and was able to bail him out in October 1987. That's when 17-year-old Daniel quickly returned to breaking into people's homes and eventually stole 2 handguns. Then, on November 16, 1987, he broke into the home of Priscilla and Andrew Gustafson, which was located in a secluded spot on Saunders Road in Townsend, Massachusetts, less than a mile from Daniel's home. The Gustafsons had 2 children, 7-year-old Abigail and 5-year-old William, and were expecting a 3rd child. Andrew worked nearby in a small law firm, and Priscilla was a teacher at the local nursery school. They reported the break-in to the police, which was one of many reports the police had recently been receiving. Strangely, most of the time, several items had been moved around the victims' homes, and the items that were taken were not of any significant value. On December 1st, 1987, Priscilla picked William up from the babysitters at 1 p.m. before returning home at 3:30 p.m. Abigail returned home on the school bus, and Andrew was still at work. This is when tragedy would strike. Andrew had attempted to call home and speak with Priscilla, but found it strange that she wasn't answering his calls. Concerned, Andrew drove home and found his wife's car in their driveway. When he entered the home, he found it eerily quiet. He made his way upstairs and shockingly found Priscilla's body lying on the bed with a pillow over her head. She had been shot and sexually assaulted. Frozen with fear, Andrew struggled to go and look for his children and called the police instead. When the police arrived, they escorted him out of the house before searching the property. Upon searching the house, they found that both kids were murdered by drowning. During a search for the killer, the community was in fear that a triple murderer was on the loose. The next day, December 2nd, 1987, Daniel was questioned about the murders, but he denied any involvement. Since the police didn't have any evidence to press charges, they had no other option but to release him. Meanwhile, retired trooper Robert Hippler brought his dog to search from the Gustafsons' home to the LaPlante's home. Not long after starting the search, a pillowcase with 2 bullet holes was found right outside the Gustafsons' home. As he continued into the nearby woods, he discovered 2 unmatched gloves and a blue plaid shirt. The gloves linked back to Daniel along with fabric fibers found at both homes. Also, the gun used to shoot Priscilla was found in a car behind the LaPlante's home, and traces of hair and blood were found on Daniel's clothes. A friend of the LaPlante family, Michael Pulaski, would say that he sold Daniel .22 caliber bullets a week before the murders. Now that they had enough evidence, it was time to arrest Daniel, but he had already disappeared. The next evening, he was found hiding in a dumpster in a lumber yard in the town of Ayer, about 10 miles from his home. Some reports have stated that he was laughing when he was arrested and showed no empathy whatsoever. During the investigation, forensic evidence such as a hair of Abigail's was found on Daniel's clothing, and bullet casings were found at his home, which matched the bullets that killed Priscilla. He was ultimately charged with 3 counts of murder, but claimed that he was at home watching music videos at the time of their deaths, but his alibi could never be verified. He was deemed competent to stand trial and would plead not guilty, but prosecutors presented over 50 witnesses and a load of forensic evidence. In the end, Daniel was found guilty of all 3 murders and given 3 life sentences. The prosecution asked for these sentences to run consecutively, while the defense team requested they run concurrently. The judge agreed with the prosecution, and Daniel was made to serve 3 consecutive 15-year sentences before he could be eligible for parole. After Daniel's conviction, he sued the courts several times, claiming they violated his rights, including his right to practice Satanism. Almost 30 years later, on March 22, 2017, a resentencing hearing took place, and Daniel requested a reduction in his sentence because he was a juvenile at the time of the crime. He requested this because of a new law that set the maximum term that a juvenile could be incarcerated without being considered for parole to 30 years. However, this law was not retroactive and therefore didn't apply to Daniel's conviction. A forensic psychologist diagnosed Daniel with several personality disorders, including antisocial personality disorder, and noted during the review that he showed a complete lack of empathy for his crimes. In the end, the judge again gave him the maximum penalty of 45 years before he would be eligible for parole. 2 years later, in 2019, Daniel launched an appeal on the basis that his sentence was unconstitutional because he was being subjected to cruel and unusual punishment. Still, the Supreme Judicial Court ruled that he must serve the entire 45-year sentence before being eligible for parole. So in 2030, by the time Daniel will be up for parole, he will be 62 years old.